Om Satchidananda Rupaya Vishwotpatyadi Hetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Janmadhyasya yatonvayaditarataschaarteshvabhignaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Dharma Projita Kaitavotra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayon Mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Va Parerishvaraha Sadyo Hridyavarudyate Trakritibihi Shushrushubistacchanat. Hari Om and greetings from Niagara Falls. There are only two types of people that are happy. Everyone else is unhappy. So what are those two types of people that are happy? It is those who are fully immersed in mukta, as in they're enlightened, and those who are fully immersed in being a mudha. They're completely ignorant. Logically, you agree. Those who are enlightened, they've transcended problems, and those who are ignorant, they don't know they have problems. And everyone in between is unhappy, trying to be happy. So really, between these three groups, are you completely ignorant? No. Are you completely enlightened? Yes, but for the sake of this example, we'll put ourselves in between. We know our nature is ananda, yet to actually feel that, to be cheerful, to be accepting, it's quite different. What's more important to know is we're not completely ignorant. And once you start to move from ignorance to knowledge, from mudha to mukta, you can never go back. You cannot go back to ignorance. No different than a language. Once you've learned a language, you don't forget that language. Your accent may change, but you don't forget that language. Once you learn how to ride a bike, you don't forget how to. It may require some balancing skills, but you don't forget. Once we know that more than creation is the creator, we never go back, we never forget to live the divine life. Our course is encouraging us to move forward. To move forward in a relative way. When you get into an argument with someone, move forward. When you falter, move forward. When your tires get stuck in the snow, you move forward. But more so in an absolute way, what are you living for in this decade, in this year, in this month, in this week, in this day, in this hour? To move forward past possessions, Christmas is over. Past positions. Labor Day will come to move forward and to live for peace. On December 16th, 2018, we completed Vedanta and Ramayana. On January 6th, 2019, there was a transition between completing Ramayana and commencing Bhagavatam. I spoke to all of you on Bhakti Shastras, the science of devotion, the science of dedication. On January 13th, 2019, we began Vibha, Vedanta and Bhagavata. From December 16th to now, January 12th, 2018 to 2020, what has the message been? Ramayana, Bhakti, Bhagavatam? That all is divine. Brahma Satya. There is infinity. There is only infinity. This is in the form of existence, awareness, joy. When I start to know that all is divine, I start to feel the grace of the divine. The closer you move to the equator, what happens to you temperature-wise? It becomes hotter, right? The sun shines on every aspect of this earth. And the closer I move to the sun, the more I feel that heat, the more that I feel the divine in me, in you, I feel the grace of the divine. And I'd shared with all of you, what is the most tactile way that you know you have grace in your life? There's guidance. You are guided from your own intellect, or you're guided from someone you have respect for, you're guided by the Guru Shishya Parampara. That's what grace is, and this grace is coming from divinity. I shared that we've studied Ramayana, Bhakti, Bhagavatam. We are being guided by Sri Tulsidashi, by Vedavyasa. That guidance to feel that grace, to feel that grace, to feel that divinity. Today, we are going to complete the 5th skanda of Srimad Bhagavatam. And leading up to this completion, we are exploring the dialogue between Bharata, but now he is simple. So, Jada Bharata. He's acting like he's not in his senses. He's acting as someone who's drunk. And he's speaking to Rahugana, a king who believes that he knows what's going on. He's right. And with Jada Bharata, we had seen that any food that came to him, he enjoyed. Any work that came to him, he enjoyed. That even when the world was trying to hurt him, he was protected by Devi Bhadrakali. There was that example. So now let us think about this in terms of our life. If we want to be Bharata, someone who's filled with light, whatever food comes to us, accept that cheerfully. Whatever work comes to us, to accept that cheerfully. Someone who's cheerful from inside, that person is protected, isn't it? Protected from poor weather, protected from people's criticisms. To be cheerful. Jada Bharata is teaching Raja Rahugana, and he's sharing with him that you should pay attention to how much change is happening in your life. You were once a servant, now you're a master, now you're calling me a servant. One day you'll go from being a master to being a servant again. And for us too, the more we know change, the more we come to understand and appreciate the changeless. But when we don't see how much our bodies are changing, how much our relationships are changing, we still depend on our bodies and relationships. Jarabharata tells Raja Rahugana, you feel stress and anxiety and depression because of your mind. Your mind's being pulled by tamas and rajas and sattva, and you need to purify your mind. And the 3 ways to do this is like the summary of their dialogue. Number 1, follow your dharma. And don't be passive about this. Treat your dharma as arpana. In our Hanuman Chalisa study, I asked you, where is God, and where did you point? Here. You're learning to internalize that God is in you, is you. When I say arpana, you keep thinking about pouring milk on Bhagavan Shiva. You keep thinking about tulsi leaves. Arpana should be your responsibilities are dedicated to the divine. You're engaged in your responsibilities because they're your responsibilities. And wherever there's arpana buddhi, there will also be prasada buddhi. One will become much more accepting. You do your best and leave the rest. So number 1, follow your dharma. Number 2 is to control your enemies. Is it possible? Is America controlling Iran, or is Iran controlling America? Is Pakistan controlling India, or does India control Pakistan? Control your enemies. How many general enemies do we have? Show me with your hands. Yes, the Shadripavaha. You have 6. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. In English, desire, anger, greed, confusion, arrogance, jealousy. How to not be a slave to the mind is to control these enemies. Can you control anger? Can you control desire? You can't directly control any of these. What needs to be done is you have to bring in the opposite virtue. What is the opposite of anger? Acceptance. What is the opposite of confusion? Clarity. What is the opposite of greed? Generosity. Right? When I tell you, don't be greedy, we're already thinking about more stuff that we want. But when one is told, be generous, you forget about all that you have. That's the strategy. And finally, how to make the mind pure, to not be pulled by tamas, rajas, and sattva, is to serve Bhagavan. What is the closest expression of Bhagavan? Imagine God's here. What's the next manifestation of God? Shastra. Shastra. Bhagavan Narayana's breath is the Veda. And what is the closest manifestation of the Shastra? The Guru Shishya Parampara. These words are verbalized, are interpreted, are shared. Serve the Guru Shishya Parampara, who serves the scripture, who serves Bhagavan. If you are serving a Guru Shishya Parampara that does not serve this Shastra, remember, you're never going to be serving Bhagavan then. You may say you are, but you're not. The Shastra is how we reach Bhagavan. Okay? Now let's complete this skanda. I'm obviously on the 5th skanda. I'm now moving to the 13th adhyaya, and I'm reading the 23rd shloka, 5:13:23. Namo mahadbhyostu, namaha shishubhyo, namo yuvabhyo, nama vatubhyaha ye brahmana gam avalinga charanti avaduta linga charanti tebhyaha shivamastu ragnyam. And this is a really fascinating Jai. It's a fascinating prostration. Here, Raja Rahugana says prostrations to Mahatmas. Makes sense, yes? But then he says prostrations to infants. Shishu. You heard the word Shishu. Prostrations to Yuva, to those who are young. Prostrations to those who are Vatus. Vatus are brahmacharis, those who are studying the Veda. Mahatmas, Shishus, Yuvas, Vatus. So we get the first and the last, Mahatma and Vatu, but why would you offer glory to an infant? What's the greatness of an infant? Everything that you all know about, they're natural, they're pure, and mostly their ego is dormant. I'm not saying they're egoless. That's a false statement. I know my kids have ego, but they're dormant right now. Why Yuva? Every teenager will be so happy about this, right? You tell your parents, prostrations to Yuva. Why? What's the logic behind this? Someone who's young or a youth has far less unlearning to do than an adult does, correct? Their habits are not as deeply formed as our habits. Yes? So Rahugana, he's so practical, focusing on egolessness, focusing on unlearning. The avadhutas that move, charanti, they are blessing me. This is what he's sharing. And I want you to think a lot about this. Avadutas, they walk around. We don't have to walk around now. We have the internet, no? Zoom is like our transportation medium. It doesn't have to be feet. Some thoughts here. What Swami Tejamananda shared about Jadabharata, he never spoke. As long as you speak to someone, they'll speak to you back. But if you don't speak to them, no one will speak to you, correct? I keep sharing with all of you, when I sit on a plane, I put my earphones in right away, but I don't attach to anything. I just put it into my collar. So people think that I have a device and I'm listening to some music, but I'm not. I just don't want to talk to them. Because if I talk to them, then they have to talk back to me. But I would like to read or rest. So Jadabharata never spoke. An insight about Rahugana. You know who he was in his previous birth? He was the deer. Remember, Bharata became a deer and then became Jadabharata. So Rahugana was that deer who's now become Rahugana. And this is such a lovely thought. It shows everyone's connected, correct? The people that have come into your life or are leaving your life are all connected. So don't take them for granted. Learn from them. Jadabharata, he completes his teaching to Rahugana by giving this example, this metaphor. It's called Bhava Atavi. Bhava Atavi. Does anyone know what Atavi means? Forest or jungle. And Bhava, becoming. In other words, samsara. He gives a long example of someone who's lost in a jungle. Here are some main points, okay? He says that this body is an effect of where did your body come from? From the elements or your parents. He says from earth, correct? The body has come from earth. How does the body survive? Earth also. Whether you're vegetarian or not, you're still eating the earth. Being a vegetarian is just more efficient. You're directly eating the earth rather than going through a middle person or middle animal. And what will happen to this body? Will go back to the earth. Whether you burn the body, bury the body, put the body in water, but we'll go back to the earth. So he's trying to share to Rahugana, you think you're the king and I'm a servant, but really, I'm a clump of earth, you're a clump of earth, below me is earth. And with that insight, pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. If I know that this body is just clay or earth, I don't take the pain of this body as seriously. Someone had asked me yesterday, have you overcome your jet lag? And I told them, I don't acknowledge jet lag because if I acknowledge it, I have to adapt to it. But if I don't acknowledge jet lag, I don't have to adapt to it. And it works. We go in with the mindset, I'm going to be so jet lagged, so obviously you're going to be. But if you don't go in with that mindset, your body is just clay. It will do whatever you tell it to do. Next, he says, the vices or our enemies, he calls them bandits. When I say bandit, what do you think of? A robber. Keep going. Like a cartoon, right? Like Wile E. Coyote's always trying to take from the Roadrunner, or Tom and Jerry, right? Someone who's always trying to take. That's what these vices are. They're thieves of our mental quietude. As I'm speaking to you right now, if you have an important meeting tomorrow at work where you think you're going to be fired, or you have to fire someone, then isn't worry taking your quietude of mind? Yes? Don't think anyone can take something valuable from you outside. They can't. The only important value you have is peace of mind, and no one can take that from you. You can only give it away. Lastly, he shares, those who are rajasic, they are blind. And he shares that rajas is of the color of gold. And often gold makes people blind too, right? Through greed, through comparison. So be careful of succumbing to rajas, and specifically, how many of you are tamasic? And you shouldn't have your hands up. The fact, everyone in Portland, yes, us. You shouldn't have your hand up for tamas. You're not tamasic. And how many of you are sattvic? I'll close my eyes as you answer or don't answer this question. But it is rajas. We feel like we're not tamasic. That's good enough, isn't it? Sattva for the next lifetime. Right now, I'll just focus on rajas. That's why Rahugana is the same way, isn't it? He's not a tamasic person, but he doesn't want to be sattvic. He's complacent with rajas. And I like this idea of rajas being the color of gold. Don't work on gold, work on diamonds. Diamonds at least are clear, correct? Like sattva. There's more clarity with diamonds. I was told that the average engagement ring that you would buy at a mall, the popular jewelers at a mall, the average price is $3,500 US. Now, for someone who loves their significant other more, it would be more along the lines of 10,000 or 15,000 or 25,000, correct? And they're shifting from gold to diamond and clarity of diamond, isn't it? I'm sharing all of this. I never bought Sheila any ring. I got a bag at Chinmaya Vibhuti for being a registrant. And I told Sheila, this is your gift from me. This is your sadhana bag. You're all thinking you're the worst husband. Focus, rajas and gold, okay? Ignore my comments about my life. Wrapping up this dialogue, Swami Tejomayananda had shared with us. He said human laws fail and God's laws pass. Humans' laws fail. This law is when we look to other worldly people, we think the purpose of living is to be worldly, but that will fail. You will experience a midlife crisis when you will shift your focus from human laws to God's laws. God's laws really means that life for independent joy. Sukha Prapti. When Rahugana had heard this, he shared that listening to you for even a moment, I've become less agitated, less of an arguer. So if you've forgotten everything that happened in this dialogue, at least be less agitated. Argue with people less. Okay? We continue. I'm now on the 26th adhyaya. So this is really the last chapter. And I am reading the 39th shloka. Shrutva stulam tatha sukshmam rupam bhagavato yatihi stule nirjitam atmanam shanai sukshmam dhyana yediti. And here what is shared. Hearing the stula, hearing the gross description of Bhagavan, and then the subtle description of Bhagavan, one should engage in contemplation from the gross to the subtle. This is what we should all do. And if you're tuning in, when Raja Parikshita asks, what should a dying man do? What should every human do? What was the answer from Sri Shuka? He says, contemplate. Contemplate on what? The best is Swarupa. Next best is Vishwarupa. Next best is Ishtarupa. Vishwarupa means in all beings. Ishtarupa means in a murti. So this is like a stula rupa, seeing God in marble. But more subtle than that is seeing God mobile. Yes? And more subtle than that is seeing Bhagavan is Brahman, existence, awareness, joy. This is how the chapter ends. Now some details for you to know. There's not a lot of teaching, but details. Between the 13th chapter and the 26th chapter, another incarnation of Bhagavan Vishnu is described, and that is Gaya. His name is Raja Gaya, is a Amsha avatar, a partial manifestation of Bhagavan Vishnu. And he was awesome. He was awesome in every which way. I tried to do some research if this Gaya is where Bhagavan Buddha was also enlightened in Gaya. I was trying to make that connection, but I couldn't find that in my studies. You can try to find that. Raja Parikshita wants to know more about sthana. He wants to know more about the details, about the surface of how humans lived. And so a lot of description on sagara. What does sagara mean in English? The oceans. Dvipa? Or continents, that's right. Varsha? Varsha here means lands or countries, okay? And if you think about the order, the ocean covers most of the earth, correct? Then continents. Continents are divided into countries like Bharata Varsha. Parvata. On Varshas there are mountains, Parvata. And coming down from mountains are Saritas, or rivers. So all of this is described a lot. And he even references then, this is earth. In the three worlds, if this is world number 1, world number 3 is Dyo. Dyo is heaven. So you have earth and you have heaven, and what's in between? You all chant this on Sundays. Antariksha. Yes, the inner space. Don't we say Dio Shanti, Bhu Shanti, Antariksha Shanti? So all of this is described. The implication of all of these details is all of this is Bhagwan's. All of this sthana is Bhagwan's. And in every sthana, Bhagwan is worshipped in their own particular way. What's significant about the next few days? What are people celebrating? Lodi. Where is Lodi celebrated? Punjab. What else is being celebrated? Sankranti. That's celebrated in a different part of Bharat, correct? Pongal, and on and on and on. So this origin is all come from Bhagavatam. In these different sthanas, Bhagwan is the most important and is worshipped in different ways. So Raja Parikshita knows about earth, space, heaven, the space between. He asks, is there anything below the earth? And there are 7 layers. This is not like if you ask a typical person following Christianity, where is hell? Here. Like as in below us. But that's not the case in Sanatana Dharma. Try to remember these. These 7 layers or dimensions below earth are Atala, below that is Vitala, below that is Sutala. Who is the popular personality in Sutala? Mahabali. Remember, Bhagavan Vishnu sends Mahabali to Sutala. That will come later. Below Sutala, Talatala. Below that, Mahatala. Below that, Rasatala. And the lowest is Patala. Patala. I again share with you, these are different dimensions. Don't think of this as hell. Hell is different, which I'm coming to now. So Raja Parikshita, he knows about the 7 dimensions above, including earth, the 7 dimensions below, and he says, is there Naraka? And where is this Naraka? And Rishi Shuka says, there is Naraka. Okay, so I'm telling you very objectively, there is hell. And he says that this Naraka is within ourselves and within our world. So objectively within our world, subjectively within ourselves. Now some brief insights into Naraka. In English, people call it hell or purgatory. Yes? If you go to the dictionary and look up the word purgatory, the main emphasis is that this is temporary. Now, there's many religions that at Judgment Day, you will absolutely be put in heaven or hell. Absolutely. But that's not true. Purgatory is temporary. Swami Chinmaya describes it as a washing machine. That we are dirty in mind. You know, I've hurt you and I've cheated you. So I go to this Naraka, I get washed up and I come back. It's like rehab, yes. Rehab is necessary. So now you would love reading the descriptions of Naraka, but it's so long. I can't tell you how many details there are in Bhagavatam. Here are some main ones which I think relate to us. I'll say relates to me, not relates to us, okay? Relates to me. That person who suffers from lobha. What is the English word for lobha? Greed. They go to a Naraka called Raurava. If you feel this is you, should write this down so that you're oriented when you're actually at that place. You're oriented to where you are. What happens here, all of the people that you hurt, all of the animals you hurt in being greedy, when you're in this Naraka, they all become snakes. And while you're in this rehab, they keep on biting you. That's how your washing happens. They just keep on biting you. Now, if you can imagine an infant who has teeth coming in and you accidentally put your finger in their mouth, that just keeps happening. Or if you bite your own tongue, imagine you just keep on biting your own tongue. I'm trying to orient you towards this naraka. Okay, here's the next naraka. If you are someone who gives into mada, what does mada mean? Arrogance. You capitalize on others. You feel you're superior. Then you go to a naraka called krimi bhoja. I'll spell that so it's clear. Krimi bhoja. Bhoja. What happens here is you become a worm. You become a worm and you eat other worms and other worms eat you. Now, if you know anything about worms, if you cut a worm in half, it'll still go on. So a lot of that is happening in krimi bhoja. Finally. And there's lots, okay? You keep reading all of this. Here's our last reference. If you give in to kama. Kama means desire, specifically lust. That is known as yamaloka. That's Yama's naraka. And he's the most intimidating. Whoever you're lusty towards, they are manifested as a metal idol. Okay, so suppose I'm lusty to Devi, not the Devi, okay? I'm just using it as an example, this Devi over here. So when I go to this Yama Naraka, Devi will be manifested as a metal idol, but will be burning hot. And you're made to embrace that idol. That's what happens in this Naraka. So detailed. It will work. I think if we had to do this, this will work. So now Raja Parikshita heard all about hell and he became sad. And he asks, if I'm someone who lived by lobha or mada or kama and he didn't, but he felt sad, then what to do? And so the entire sixth skanda, the focus is poshana or grace. That's an awesome connection. Okay, what do I do? This is what you have to do now. And we'll begin that study when Uttarayana begins. I tried to finish this in this way, that we finish this skanda, we begin the next skanda as the sun moves closer to us. We move closer to the sun. Next week, I'm actually going to speak to all of you about Surya Narayana. Right? We all think about Surya Narayana, Satya Narayana. So I'll give you some details about what Surya Narayana actually is, factually is. Iti panchamaha skandaha samaptaha. Hari Om Tat Sat.